Russian artillery and cruise missiles strike Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities for a third day in a row.
After another night of fighting across Ukraine, President Zelenskyy calls on compatriots and the world to fight off the Russian invasion. Desperate Ukrainians seek shelter from the violence while thousands head for the border in an attempt to flee the fighting.
Russian artillery and cruise missiles have been striking Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities for a third day. This missile hit a residential building in a western suburb of Kyiv early on Saturday morning, killing at least 2 people. According to the city mayor Vitaly Klitschko, at least 35 people were injured on Friday night, including 2 children. The health ministry says at least 198 people have been killed so far. Russian soldiers are advancing closer to the centre, although it's not clear how close they've got. There are reports of street fighting, and city officials have been urging people to take shelter. Skirmishes reported on the edge of the city suggested that small Russian units were trying to clear a path for the main forces. The fighting has now evolved into Europe's largest ground war since World War II.
After fighting continued overnight and on Saturday, the Ukrainian president told the nation that the capital and other key cities were under control of Ukrainian forces. Volodymyr Zelenskyy urged his compatriots to continue to defend the country and urged the world to stand with them against Russia.
Кожному українцю треба пам'ятати одне: якщо можете зупиняти і знищувати окупантів.
Every Ukrainian needs to remember one thing. If you can stop and destroy the occupants, do it. Everyone who can return to Ukraine, return to defend Ukraine, and then we'll have a lot of work to rebuild it. Everybody who can defend Ukraine abroad, do it, purposefully, together, continuously. All the friends of Ukraine who can join the defence, come, we will give you arms.
Безперервно. Всі друзі України, хто хоче приєднатися до захисту, приїжджайте. Ми дамо вам зброю.
The president also called on Russians to rise up against the Kremlin's decision to invade and thanked those who already have.
Я хочу, чтобы меня услышали в России. Абсолютно все.
Now I want absolutely everyone to hear me in Russia. Thousands of victims, hundreds of prisoners who just can't understand what they were sent to Ukraine for. Sent to Ukraine to die, to kill others. The sooner you tell your government that the war has to stop immediately, the more of your people will stay alive.
Тем больше ваших людей останутся живыми.
Zelenskyy once again called on people not to fall for what he called fake news and showed a video to prove he was still in Kyiv and hadn't left the city as some have claimed.
Well, the sun is unusually bright this morning over the Ukrainian capital, but the mood is sterner than ever. The news that more explosions and more fighting had occurred last night just increased the anxiety and the anger of the population. I'll just take you on a quick, short tour of a neighborhood I'm staying in, right in the city center, to show you the atmosphere here. I mean, the streets are really deserted, aside from a few passers-by and also journalists and just people curious to see what the journalists are doing around here. So that was one street. The cafes, the bars, the restaurants and the shops are all closed except for a few ones which closed very early. Behind me you see another deserted street. So really the atmosphere here is gloomy, and people that I've met all day and yesterday night are really panicked. They're also angry. I met a lot of people who had taken shelter to spend the night in the underground last night for the second time. That's the only place where they felt safe, and they were there because the word was spreading that the Russian troops could be inside the city at any time. So many of them were also telling me that they would try to catch a train to another safer part of the country, and places from where they could reach Poland. A lot of people are still trying to flee to Poland at the moment. On the other hand, they were also telling me that they would do anything they could in their own way. Here's another deserted street, and that's basically what you see in Kyiv. So yes, they were saying that they were supportive and, very admirative of their military, of their troops, and they also praised the way the government and their president actually handled the situation. And in fact, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy issued a video last night on social media which went absolutely viral. He wanted to reassure the public that he had not escaped the country, he had not disappeared, to debunk allegations made by Russian sources. And so he stood in front of the presidential building with his top advisors saying, telling people that they were all here and supportive of the population. And this, for the Ukrainian population, is also a sign of support, of unity. And everyone I've met yesterday was insisting on this, saying that, together, and I quote, "Together we are stronger and we will overcome." So this is the message they clearly wanted to convey to the world, and while at the same time, being at a loss for words and telling me about the complete uncertainty in which they lived. And they really called again and again the international community, and in particular Europe, to do more, to take further steps to help Ukraine get out of this nightmare. Valerie Goria in Kyiv from Euronews.
As Russian troops push towards the centre of the city, some residents have taken shelter in Kyiv's metro stations. For now they're safe, but no one knows what may happen in the next few days. One family's scared enough that they now want to go to Poland.
Our feelings, we are angry, we are scared, we are nervous, and we don't know what to do, because it's our home, it's our city, it's our country, but we should go to save our lives. And it's devastating,
But while some are leaving or planning to, others say they have confidence in their military.
It really feels really safe here. There's a lot of people, families, acquaintances, friends. But I don't know, we have a long time to wait, and I hope that it's gonna be okay. We still believe in our forces. We still believe that it's gonna end up into something we hope good.
Ukrainians are desperate for the rest of Europe to help them militarily, but neither the EU nor any European state is offering to fight Russia.
We begging European community for help us. You should to ban Russia from SWIFT. We think you should help us with NATO force, and we want to you help us to close the sky.
The everyday lives people had only days ago are now gone, and no one knows when they'll return. As Russian artillery and cruise missile strikes continue, there are few people who are prepared to brave Kiev's streets. Most have obeyed the authorities' call to take shelter. Our correspondent Sasha Vakulina has sent this report from an undisclosed location in the city.
Kyiv residents had a very tough night, which they all spent in shelters after being told to stock on blankets, water and food, since the authorities do not know when people would be allowed out. The situation is too dangerous now in the Ukrainian capital. All night long we could hear the explosions, and then early in the morning we were all woken up by a very, very loud explosion, which we now know that was a missile hitting a residential building in the area that is close to the Zhuliany airport. This is the second biggest airport in Kyiv, in Ukraine's capital. People still stay in shelters. The mood is very, very grim. They're trying to stay safe. They're trying not to leave the basements or the underground metro stations. These are now the safest places to be. Ukrainian authorities and Kyiv authorities are doing their best to give the regular updates to the people, still telling them to stay calm, not to panic, to stay safe, to be in shelter, and to be very, very careful with how they consume information, warning people about the huge amount of some fake information that could be online. Now, with this beautiful day, the sun is shining, the sky is now blue, but I could hear still now the explosions that are happening in the Ukrainian capital. Here, the residents are bracing for what's coming next during the day. Sasha Vakulina, Euronews, Kyiv.
As the night had fallen on the Ukrainian capital, all seemed calm in the deserted city center. But behind the quietness, Kyiv on Tuesday was bracing for the storm. Security was on maximum alert.
Well, all police units in Kyiv are under combat alarm. So here is a group controlling vehicles.
Off camera, they tell me they found several automatic rifles in this vehicle. The gun's serial numbers were erased, they're not registered. The men get nervous. It's the third time in one day that this patrol has made such findings. And there had been many more, they said, on Tuesday in Kyiv, where street fighting was expected if Russia invaded the capital that night. Valery Goya, Euronews.
Thousands of Ukrainians are attempting to leave their homeland to escape the violence of the Russian invasion. From the city of Mostishka, it's less than 20 kilometers to the border with Poland. But people are spending days and nights in traffic for the chance to leave Ukraine and much of their lives behind.
We are staying here for a long time, maybe 6 or 7 hours already, but it's crazy. It's crazy traffic. I don't know how to leave my native country. Actually, I don't want to leave my native country, but because of the invaders, I must leave it as fast as possible.
Many Ukrainians who do manage to cross the border have no plan other than escape. They have no shelter, no job to go to, no transportation and limited resources, and they consider themselves lucky to have got out. On the Polish side, some volunteers have been organised to help them.
We have already organized a web of people who will be willing to help with housing, with employment, with transportation. And right now we have found housing for about 12 families.
For many families leaving the country, there's the added heartbreak and fear of having to leave husbands, fathers and sons behind. All men aged between 18 and 60 are forbidden from leaving by the Ukrainian government.
War is never kind to the innocents. Maxim Dimitrov currently lives in Bulgaria, but his entire family is in Ukraine. He, along with many from the diaspora, are concerned for the fate of those back home. He says, "I think this insanity that is happening from one person is horrific, and I believe that people have the wits in their head to think soberly enough and assess the situation. Many of them are fighting for their land because they don't want anyone to liberate them from anything. I don't understand what we need to be liberated from." Some have been lucky to get out. Tatiana arrived in Varna in Bulgaria as she fled the war. She says, "My husband is in Ukraine, my family is in Ukraine, and all my friends. My husband was born in Ukraine, and he has his parents there. He wants to defend his land, his business, everything." Recently, it's felt like much of Ukraine has been uprooted and in a permanent state of movement. such are the tragic consequences of war. As many attempt to flee, Krasimir Pankowski is organising volunteers to drive to the Ukrainian-Polish border to help the new arrivees enter the EU safely. He says, "We've organised to take emergency people because they're letting women and children cross the Polish border on foot at the moment. We want to help them and bring them to Bulgaria." The situation is that Ukraine is on fire right now. There's no one to seek help from. The Western world seems to me to be reacting poorly. The only way is to organise ourselves and act. It's an utterly desperate situation, as civilian areas have been hit. Tatiana is thinking of her loved ones. She says, "I'm afraid for my family, I'm afraid for my friends, I'm afraid for all Ukrainians." Like many of her compatriots, she lives in constant fear for her family. The longer this war continues, the longer innocent people will suffer.